Hi, today I'm going to show you how to sew a placket on the front of a shirt. I'm using the OUSM Designs placket shirt. I have the front bodice cut. As you can see, I've folded it in half and pressed in a center line here. Then I've cut 3 pieces of knit interfacing and 2 placket rectangles. So these are what's going to form my placket in the end. I cut out my rectangles. Then I pressed them in half. Then on one long edge, I pressed under my seam allowance. So I have a piece that when laid flat looks like this. So first you pressed it in half, then you pressed under the seam allowance. It's going to be the easiest to get your placket in nice and smooth if you make sure you're really pressing everything. So I'm going to take my third piece of interfacing and cut it in half lengthwise. I'm going to center it on that press line that I made down the middle of the shirt and iron it. Obviously, I've got that bumpy side down. Now what I'm going to do is edge stitch along this rectangle to form guidelines for where I'm going to put the placket. So I'm going to take a stitching line and put it all around the edge of this interfaced rectangle. So now you have edge stitched a rectangle around your interfacing piece on the shirt. You want your stitching line to match your fabric. I want mine to stick out so you can see it. This is a basting line that you're going to be stitching over again. They're guidelines that you've set in. So I'm going to flip it over, and you can see now, because I did that really hard press, you can see where my press line is. If you can't, fold your shirt again and give it another press, because we're going to use that as a guideline. From the bottom of your rectangle, on that center line, mark 1/2 inch up. So just mark it however. I'm just going to put a pin in here. Now if you want to get out your a drawing pencil and a ruler and pop in a guideline here, go right ahead. I'm going to just wing it because I can see my fold line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut straight down my fold line inside of my sewn rectangle until I hit that pin. Okay, so I hit my pin, I'll pull my pin out, and now I'm going to cut diagonals into the corner off that line, and but I'm not going to snip my stitching line. So I'm just going to do a little snip here and a little snip here without going into my stitch line. So now I have a separated line interfacing on both sides and this little like triangle guy at the bottom here. Okay, so we've got our shirt now prepped. We're going to take our pieces that we have previously ironed in half and then tucked that edge underneath that we've got nice and pressed. These are also interfaced. And we're going to line the raw edge of that, so that side that we didn't press under, with the raw edge of our shirt. And they should go, and you're going to kind of just lift this triangle out of the way. But you're going to pin it from the very bottom, so to the very bottom here. So when we lay our triangle over, it kind of looks like this, but just push that triangle out of the way. So we're going to pin it from the very bottom to the very top of our shirt. And depending, I'm making it, this is a 12-month that I'm prepping for you here, so that triangle is pretty tiny. On the bigger sizes, it's going to look a little bigger because your placket is wider. But this is a 12-month. But just so you have an idea, I'm going to pin this in place and then flip it over so you can see what it looks like from the back. And now I usually just pin both, because you're going to do this then on the second side, on your second placket. I usually pin both, but if it's easier for you the first time to just pin one so you have less fabric flying around, that's totally fine. So from the back side, when you fold this little triangle, you can go forward, back, or wherever, so it's just out of your way, you're going to see your stitching line. And then down here, there'll be that little triangle, and the right side of the fabric from that placket. Your next step is to, now that you have this pinned in place, stitch straight down that line that you sewed in place to the bottom of this triangle, or to the rectangle. So from the top all the way to the bottom of your stitching line on both sides. So now we've sewn both of our plackets on. We've met those raw edges, and then we put our stitch line in here. And you're going to kind of open these up and once again pull these forward and press your seam allowance into the placket. So kind of open it up and press that seam allowance nice and hard inside. Then what you'll do is you'll take this is that smaller edge that we folded in, and wrap it around like this. Okay? So the seam allowance comes toward the center of your shirt. The seam allowance you just sewed comes toward the center of your shirt. It's essentially matching your pressed fold line, your center fold of the placket. Tuck underneath that 3/8 inch. Again, that should be really easy because that you should have a nice clean press line there. And then wrap your placket around, which should come right around nice and easy because this line here, that edge, should be your center fold of your placket line. So it's all, your placket is essentially just folding into place where your press lines were. So one more time, seam allowance of the shirt gets pressed toward the placket. Seam allowance on the outer edge, which you've already pressed, make sure it's tucked under, and then fold it over just so you're covering your stitch line. Then what you're going to do from the front, you need to pin it obviously in place, and then from the front you're going to edge stitch the inside edge, so right on the edge of the placket here. So I'm going to stitch right on the orange fabric just inside of the green line here, and then I'm going to come down and edge stitch the outside of the placket here. And before I do that, after I kind of pin it and have it in place, I'm just going to really do a really hard press all the way through. And by continuing to iron and press your placket, you're keeping it like small and condensed, and it kind of helps fight any of the thickness that might build up here. Okay, so I've edge stitched my placket on both sides, on the outer edge and on the inner edge, making sure to catch all of my inside seams. So you're going to lap your two pieces over, and depending on whether or not you're making the shirt for a girl or a boy, you lap it left over right or right over left. And this triangle, so your triangle that you cut, both the interfaced and the fabric, need to be pushed to the back. You're going to lap your pieces over each other, however you need to do that. So you've got your triangle at the bottom, your pieces lapped over, and you're kind of going to fold your shirt in half. Do you see how that triangle sticks out there? So making sure that you are catching both of the lapped pieces, so like this. Both pieces of the bottom of both plackets, it's kind of hard to see, the bottom of both plackets in the triangle, you are going to sew over that last stitching line. So that last bottom of your rectangle stitching line, and in that you want to catch your triangles and the very bottom raw unfinished part of your placket and nothing else. So from edge of triangle to edge of triangle, you're going to catch that triangle of fabric and the very bottom edges of your placket. So once I've laid my two pieces over each other, and ignoring the fact that I am terrible at snipping threads, I sewn over that triangle line, and then when I flip it over, you can see I've closed the bottom of the placket. Now, the few things to keep in mind and to be wary of here is if you over sew, your triangle, you'll see you're going to get kind of like I did it a little bit over on this side, you'll get kind of this bubbling in the fabric. So if you go over your stitch line, you're going to start catching your fabric. You need to be careful that your tabs don't move away from each other. Otherwise, you will, and your placket won't be lined up nicely like this. It'll be like up here. It can look like this where they're offset from each other. So you want to make sure that you keep your tabs together, and so just from the edge of your triangle to your triangle, and then that closes your placket. And then you can go ahead and add your buttonholes or snaps or closure, and you have a finished placket. And again, my tip would be press, press, press. Makes it much easier.